everyone. Welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths. And today we have got our second women's panel that is in honor of Women's Month of March. And these are all friends of mine who I am so honored to walk the journey with. All of these incredible, badass women are making waves in sports, entertainment, agency, media side. And these are a lot of the spaces that haven't been where women have really historically led. And so it is an absolute honor to welcome this crew of ladies here today. So without further ado, I am going to go into a round of intros here. We are going to start with Yvonne.
Well, hello. Thanks, Shauna, for having me on. It's an honor to be on this panel with everyone. My name is Yvonne Lara. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at the American Soccer organization. So we've been around since 1964, and it's one of the biggest grassroots youth soccer organizations in the country. So I do everything Marcom and sponsorships and events. So yeah, definitely a big space to be in, but an important space to have women in. So I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kim.
Hi, Shauna, thanks again for having me on here, and great to see all of my friends via Zoom. Kim Daly, I am the Senior Director of Sponsorship Strategy and Activation at One Team Partners. One Team is a relatively new organization. It formed at the end of 2019 and really got going right during the pandemic, and which has been a challenge in its own way, but also very good. We've seen a lot of success. We are essentially the commercial arm to 6 different players associations. And what we're really trying to do is sit on the side of the table of the athlete and bring to them marketing and licensing opportunities, and really seeing the athlete themselves as a brand partner. They have stories to tell that also resonate with brands, and how can we make those authentic connections? So that's really what we're looking to do. And it's been a great journey thus far, and we see a lot of opportunity ahead. So
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Connie.
Hello, everyone. I'm also so thankful to be here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with all of you. I am Connie Avila. I am the Chief Brand Officer for Business for Good, and we are a venture philanthropy. Our goal is to strengthen and build communities, and we do that by investing in entrepreneurs and small businesses, often in underserved communities. So I lead the brand vision and marketing for Business for Good, plus our owned and accelerated businesses, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 businesses right now. We are in a startup mode. So things are busy and crazy in the best possible way. And, I love this work, so I'm really excited to be doing it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think probably everybody on this call can relate to the busy and crazy, and have all taken on so much during this time. So thank you for making space for this, Connie. Jen.
Well, thank you for having us. I was just thinking that I was in this, I don't know if it was like a lecture or something one day, and a woman said, I'm really uncomfortable speaking to this group of women because I speak to men all day. So I sort of feel the same. So I'm very happy to be with all of you today. I am the co-founder and executive vice president of the basketball tournament on ESPN. We are a 64-team $1 million summer basketball tournament. Winner take all, single elimination. We're many things to many people. We're going into our 9th year, so always trying to kind of approach it from the underdog perspective and grow it every year. And so I'm really excited to talk about sort of where TBT and women's sports intersect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Julie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is so exciting to be in company of such an amazing panel. I'm also in the sports space. I am the head of strategic partnerships at New York Roadrunners. We are a nonprofit focused on helping and inspiring people through running. We've been around for just over 60 years, and we started as a community running organization, and now we execute over 300 programs and events a year, including the world's largest marathon, the TCS New York City Marathon. So I manage a team who supports our corporate, partnerships portfolio. It's just over 20 partners, as well as some additional licensing partners. So it's a really exciting time in running, which was a place where a lot of people turned to in the pandemic to find solace and strength. And we're really excited to be back to large scale live events. So happy to be here.
Nice, thank you. And I want to pause actually, because Jen, you actually made me think of this when you're talking about typically presenting to men or being like, you pop out to a call and you're like, oh, hi, I'm the woman in this call. And so I also want to say, like, each one of you have absolutely made an impact and a difference in my life in the past couple of years. Some of you I knew before, some of you I got closer to during this time. And it's been an amazing thing. I think more than ever during this, I've actually developed more female friends, more female connections in this space. And I don't know, I almost like thank COVID and the pandemic experience for that. So I just think it's kind of worth mentioning in general, just as a moment of gratitude. So we are going to start this with a little icebreaker game that is taken from actually Curious, which is, I had Michael Tennant, the founder, on the podcast. He's awesome. So his company is called Curious Labs, and they do a lot of work with companies and individuals related to empathy and curiosity. And so he has this card game. And so what we're going to do is I picked the same question that I asked the other panel. And so we're going to toss it out, and anybody who has an answer that you want to go first, you can build on each other however you want to do this, but the goal is that everybody answers in a way that's authentic to you as a human, as a leader. So what are you willing to fight for and why?
I feel like that has changed over the years, but right now I would fight for equity and fairness. I'm in that headspace and that feeling and that time in my life when, I feel like everyone deserves a shot. And I understand that that's a blanket statement, but there's so much that's been uncovered recently that we see that that's not the case. And it's being discussed more, as it should be. Mm-hmm. So, that's something that's near and dear to me.
Nice, thank you.
I'm happy to go next. Okay. Well, the true answer is there's so many things that come to mind, both on like a personal and professional level. I think the easier answer is, for me, women in sports. We all know the statistics around exposure and investment and opportunity. There's so many gaps, and I've been thinking about this so much, especially over the last year, of how can you fill all of those gaps? Yeah. Or do you just have to sort of approach one at a time? But I feel like momentum actually is going in the right way. We've seen women on TV more viewership of those women. We've seen more opportunities for them, higher pay. So, that's great, but there's obviously still a long way to go. I know, Shauna, you and I have talked about, on my other life, I was a plaintiff on a Title IX lawsuit in college. And so it's really top of mind for me right now, is just fighting for, to try to fill all those gaps for women in sports in general.
Absolutely. And the work you're doing to do that is so appreciated, I have to say. So anybody else? We've got 3 more people. Yeah. I'm calling on you.
I can say taking the risk. I've been thinking, like, once you pose the question, what are the things I have been sort of more vocal about or really focused on lately. And it's, I think some of that risk taking, it just applied to, to your point, in work or professional. I find myself, I think you hit a certain space in your career too, where you feel more confident in your voice or more confident, focused on your convictions. But for me, it's a lot of, it's such a rapidly changing time. And so sometimes there's a fear of even just testing something out and seeing what happens. And we get mired in all the what ifs instead of just all the good what ifs of what could happen. So I'll say fight for taking the risk.
Nice.
I would take it a little more personal, and I would fight for my family and my kids and things that they're, to help show them how, to stand up for what's right. And so it's really, that's what it's fighting for what's right. But by doing it, showing my, like I said, my kids, my families, those that may not feel like they have a strong enough voice, or they don't know what to do or who to turn to next, and showing them positive ways to handle a challenging situation, and being able to stand up for them. So that's how I would take it.
Nice, thank you.
I
Yvonne.
realize I'm the last person. No, I think building on what everybody has said, but I think a little bit more with Connie is just that idea of being able to fight for integrity and just like integrity in myself and my choices, but also in the work that I'm doing. So I think that sometimes, we just can sit back, or at least I've had that. We sit back and we're like, okay, I guess. And I think during this time, to Julie's point of just a lot of reflection, at least personally for myself, I've had of like, where do I want to be? And would I be proud, like that my nephews and, that they would see me and be an example as a strong female in that space to, their young men, and just being able to say that, what is important to me, what am I willing to put my name next to, as well as saying, what else can I help bring about? And for me, it's really about empowerment of being, an example to hold that door open for others that may not know that there's an opportunity there, and to just, kind of make my parents proud. My dad, when he came to the country as a kid, his whole thing was like to be told like, you can do whatever you want. And that's something they instilled in us. And to continue to say that no door, no matter what you look like, no matter where you came from, should be closed to you. And so just really fighting to be able to open those for everybody.
That's nice. It's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as you all are talking, this thing hit me, is that all of you are focusing on this, fighting. There's an element of like fighting for others, which I think is really powerful. And it's also representative of you all being leaders. So again, just kind of wanted to call that out. So let's dive right into the questions from here and just kick off the whole conversation. Pretty obvious question here, but in general, what are your thoughts on women in business and just the evolution? Like, we made progress, or sometimes I see days where I'm like, oh, progress. And like, Jen was talking about, there's, I see some progress in women in sport, and but just women in general. I'm just curious, like, what are you actually seeing and feeling?
I have seen progress. What I've noticed over the years is more like a light shined on the difference of men or women in business. I think when I got started, I don't think anybody was paying attention to the differences of how many men were in the positions, what positions men were in versus women were in. And so I think there's just been a brighter spotlight on it, which is causing us all to kind of think a little bit differently about it and just open up our perspective, which I think is then leading to some of the changes that we're starting to see. There's still a road to go, and I think we'll get there. But I think as much as we support each other, having support from our male counterparts is just as important to continue that growth and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always find these discussions interesting because I was in sort of a unique environment. Most of my career was spent agency side and PR and experiential marketing agencies before coming into the nonprofit space. And I always have had very strong senior female leaders, and they championed me up. And so I wasn't really working ever in environments where that wasn't the case. And actually at New York Roadrunners, we have, and I continue to have, I report into a senior SVP, Christine Burke, and we have a wide range of female leadership that also represent a lot of other diverse groups. So I've always felt lucky and like a little bit ignorant of, some other industries or experiences. I've met friends in different organizations who have said like, I'm the only woman, in this space. So for me, it's an interesting dialogue. I feel super lucky that I just happened to be in environments and organizations where that was more of the norm. But to build on what Kim said, I feel like now, no matter what sort of media I'm consuming, almost every day it's a spotlight on, a woman ascending to the CEO level, or to your point, a shift in like how leadership is maybe changing because of the influence of women in the space, or how cultures might be shifting, and focusing on the tech space. We see it obviously in the sports space with the, right now I'm very much like consuming the Olympics, and there's such great stories and inclusion and diversity stories, and spotlighting women in senior positions, whether it's coaching or other roles. So I'm pleased with the spotlight on it. And I think also pleased that like as generations evolve, it's less of even it's much more natural and just sort of part of culture. And I think, Yvonne, building on what you said, there's, to me, much more assumption that like, yes, everyone can get these roles. Like it's part of the growth. So I hope that continues while it's a bigger part of inclusion as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to that point, it's interesting. I had that same dichotomy of like when I was in the nonprofit space the first time. I came from television, and then I went into nonprofit space. That's a hard turn. But in the TV space, it was it was young, and that constant, like the scrutiny of the work and the comments that I won't share, like that were said to me, were just like, oh, okay. It's just like before the Me Too movement, all that kind of stuff would happen and you just accepted it. Whereas now that never fly. And you were, lauded for your work, not just like the way you looked, or, even what I've noticed even more so is the women to women, the woman to woman interaction has changed and evolved. I think I've seen that happen. It's that more competitive, we were pitted against each other. I mean, it's the Bachelor Syndrome. If you look at that, it's like pit all these girls against each other to do one thing. I noticed that evolution has turned more into championing each other and not being threatened by what we are all doing, but saying like, how can we support and really lift each other up, because when I went into the nonprofit space first time with Habitat, it was all females. I was just like surrounded by females, and it was the first time that I didn't feel pitted against them. But this is the space that we should be in. It shouldn't be special. There's a woman CEO. You want to get away from that eventually. I watched a documentary just recently, and this woman, a lawyer, was actually talking, and she said her daughter had never met a male lawyer before. and she was 5, and she went into some sort of meeting at her mom's office, and this gentleman walked in, and she was like, what do you do? And he said, I'm a lawyer. And she was like, how is that possible? Only women are lawyers. And like, what a weird brain shift for that little girl to see. And that should just be like, no, it doesn't matter what gender you are, like that is your job. And so I think for me, that's where I've seen that conversation change, is that especially us as females are being able and feel more comfortable to empower one another in the space that we're in, even if we are doing the same job, because we can celebrate what we each bring to the table.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. Connie, or Jen, anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking about what Julie had said about being, surrounded and having lots of female leadership around her, from the beginning. And I started out in the music industry and radio, and then went over to live entertainment. And, I would say at least for the first 10 years, I had one female role model to go after. And in thinking back, and I think about her all the time, and I just remember how hard she was. And I remember she was always surrounded by men in the room, arguing a point and having to fight to get her voice heard. And that was all that I was accustomed to. So as I moved on, from like radio station to radio station, and then, into venues and things like that, there is that invisibility piece as you go up the ladder. So, Yvonne, also what you had said, definitely sparked a few memories that were, difficult, as I was growing, into my roles, and it's like, well, no, I earned being here, and now I have to prove it all over again while I'm in the role. So, it's illuminating, to see the differences now, and the person that I try to be for, specifically for the women that I see up and coming, the young professionals, and we do our best to shine them on in a really great way, and share our experiences and things like that. But it was pretty empty back then, and when it was very clear sometimes that I was not welcome. You are female, you are Latina, what are you doing here? And there's a shift in the energy in the room sometimes, and it's a feeling that even though I don't like it, I like to remember, because it just reminds me how far I've come, and where we are. And I'm grateful at least for that experience, because it's brought out other good things, that I've been able to harness, as I've grown in my career and personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, I'm super curious to hear what you have to say on this topic, partly because you said when we opened up here, you said that you spend most of your days on calls with all men. So I'm curious how much you see, reality of, change. And I think we see it in different ways. So I'm just curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it a lot on a larger, sort of systemic level. Which is to say that, a lot of the people that I talk to every day are not only men, but they're the decision makers, right? And but there are, as I was saying before, a lot more women in those positions that really, kind of stand out and are celebrated every day and highlighted. And I've been thinking, the system still is sort of, I hate to say it, but they're stacked against us, right? I mean, we're still very much the minority in those positions. And I've really enjoyed watching the organizations or groups that have tried to bring a lot of those executives and decision makers and just, females in industry together. Because I think, sort of it just like power in numbers, because sometimes you can kind of feel alone where you are, it's like, we're all kind of speaking to that. It's like, we might be surrounded by women, but we feel alone at the top, or we feel where we are the only woman, or and so just, bringing those people together, sort of feeling that power in numbers, and also just finding a way to work within the system until we can continue to grow those numbers, and so hoping to speak to more female decision makers in the future, and not always have those calls be with men. And not to say that like a lot of the men that I speak to don't understand, where we're coming from, trying to work, on like to develop a women's product or anything like that. I think they get it. But they just don't really know how to approach this area. So I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I've just been thinking a lot about like the overall system that we're working in, and kind of like where our place in it is right now, and how we sort of continue to evolve that.
Right. Yeah, and I think what you hit on, I don't think you were off topic at all. You actually sparked a lot of thinking on my part while you were talking. And I think like there is a systemic issue still, and I don't think that anybody can deny that. And I think it just is that I start to see a shift and increased level of awareness and discussion and all of those things, which is where I see and I take take hope. Like it is going to continue, but again, I think just the reality is that we can point to a lot of things that actually show that in some areas it hasn't progressed, it's actually regressed. And so, I think these are some of the things, and it's important. I asked the question because it's important that we keep talking about it. And like, I think we need to have women who are able to identify what's working, what's not, and be part of that change. And, and also as I think Kim, as you said, like pointing to some of the men who are also part of that. And I'm grateful, to have those people in my journey as well. What I really would like to do is be to the point where I'm not surprised when I see and hear a lot of women in leadership roles. I was on a call just this week with a very senior person at a tech company that is a client at the agency CMD where I work. And she's in a senior role. So I was like, oh, this is great. And then all the women, all the people that she talked about in roles that are in leadership roles above her and around her, I think almost all of them were women. And I found myself being like pleasantly surprised and really taking note of almost like counting the people. And again, like that's wonderful to see. And I just really hope that I can stop being surprised by it. Mm-hmm. So, I'm also kind of going on that, the progress, the regression part is to point to a little bit of like what we've seen in these last, these last few years, really this spotlight on a lot of the injustices that were going on, racial injustice, people, say it was like the, Black Lives Matter movement dialing up, the instances of Asian hate that was, we've seen, and people taking action against that. I think, and we have a diverse group here. And so I think there have been a lot of groups, including women, minorities, that have been under attack during this time, and women's rights and things like that. And so you all are working, I'll call it in the field, right? In corporate America, you have staff, you've got programs that you're leading. And it just makes me think about like the DEI space and what are we seeing here? And are you seeing progress? I actually still get surprised when I hear how far behind so many companies are in their DEI action, and places where I still see them or hear stories from friends of mine who are like, yeah, I was that Black guy who got hired, or I was the Latina checkbox, and so I just love to hear you all maybe share either some of the things that you're seeing, to the good, to the not good, places of improvement, programs that maybe even you've been a part of bringing forward. Is there anything you can share on that?
I would say my experience, you hit a couple of nerves, Shauna. A couple of things. So, in the last 2 years, I've been called by recruiters, and while it may not be the first thing out of their mouths, pretty early on, it's like they're looking for someone Hispanic or something like that. And it's I don't know sometimes how to take that. It's insulting, because on my own merits, we wouldn't be having this conversation, or what exactly are you saying, or that feeling of being the token hire, it's out there. And so also in the last few years, putting money behind DEI, and it's very trendy and it's very sexy. And so, you see big corporations throwing some money at it, and the press releases go out, and, all this stuff. And then what'll be interesting, and which is happening now, a lot of people are looking back at, so you said you were going to do this. How's it going? So I think that there's a lot of accountability conversations happening now that it's been some time, because it does, to really roll it out authentically and with a genuine feeling of, we really need the diversity within our organization. It takes time. And I've spoken to a couple of leaders recently, like the heads of HR, diversity and culture. And listen, none of these, people of color should only be rolled into these, head of, diversity and inclusion roles, so that's the other thing, right? Kind of getting pigeonholed in there, but it really should be, a mix, because we are all people that need to be educated in this space and figure out how is everyone working together. The idea is not to bring in, Latinas or Blacks or Asians or any group like that without understanding how we are all going to be interconnected within this organization. organization. So, I mean, it's just been, interesting, like I said, having those, recruiter conversations, really? Okay, and a friend of mine, she's Indian, she said, well, that just cost him like $40,000 more, so, if that's what you're looking for, it's gonna cost you, so that's the joke, but it's kind of alarming how it's being like everyone's kind of like awkwardly going into the space, trying to figure out the right way to approach it and what's going to feel authentic for the organization and hire qualified people at the end of the day.
That's great points, Connie. Thank you so much. Anyone want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm up with Connie in that way, is that I think that people's discomfort with it makes it something where they're like, can you just do it so it just goes away quick, like so we said we did it and then we can just move forward.
Yeah, you're both bringing up really interesting points. I do recall in 2020 there was such a big movement, Connie, to your point, online, of like, these are the commitments that all of these organizations are making. And I personally, truthfully, I haven't been paying very much attention to other companies to see if like annually now they're releasing that action. I'm sure there's a lot of internal work that they're doing. At our organization, we have a new team in place, a DEIS team, who for me, it's like, I can say grounding myself in education. What I've found refreshing that they're doing is, right, like the whole past year and a half, it's been like, we're going to get everybody speaking the same language. We're going to get everybody educated. We're going to like lay the foundation. And for a lot of our employees, it's like more action, we need change. And it's like, first we have to really get a lot of data. We have to like get feedback. We have to like benchmark where we are, and then we're going to move forward. And they're just at the phase where they did a bunch of reporting on the composition of the staff, and they're going to figure out sort of the release of that and how that'll blend in sort of an annual report and an action from there. Like, for example, like this year they hope to launch employee resource groups. It wasn't like the first thing they did. It was like, let's do an assess. I really have appreciated the strategic approach they've taken, and the head of that department has many years of experience in this space. So for me, it's been really listening and learning, because every day I say, if I say something and I'm probably like, oh, that wasn't, like I'm in my own space. I'm not being thoughtful. But as a leader, I think, Shauna, to go back to your original question too, like what I'm trying to do is ground myself and like taking those tidbits of what I'm learning and those pieces and like challenging myself, like, is my response to this being thoughtful of like everyone, in the audience? Because even simple, sometimes I think decisions, there's so much background that I'm not considering. Like, I'm not a parent. I'm not, I've got people on my team that are like battling illness, that are parents, that are caregivers for maybe an older relative. There's all these things that like now I'm learning like are part of this thought process and consideration set that we need to think about. And I think diversity inclusion on such a broader scale, like the veteran community, maybe an individual that identifies as having a disability. So I hope that, all these positions that you see posted for these roles, can be filled, in that more companies can find a good streamlined approach to this, and that the employees will continue to be vocal and demand it. That's certainly what prompted it at our organization, was truly like employee demand to say this is time to make changes. So
yeah, I really,
it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you talked about this, because it's as this group has talked, there's so much that's upon us to, in some ways, to speak up and to help create a forum that is where people are learning and actually taking action to improve things. And there's also this element, Julie, you made, the like putting the mirror up in front of ourselves and checking ourselves, and what are we learning and how are we speaking or operating. And even sometimes if we say something that's not, it comes out and we're like, whoa, wait a second, I didn't intend that, or it came out the wrong way, owning that. And that is part of being a leader, because none of us are perfect as leaders. We're all kind of figuring it out, as we go along. And before we leave this topic though, I'm really curious, Jen, in TBT, because it is very much that basketball space, and we've seen so much that the NBA did, especially during the last couple of years, related to DEI, whether it was like the wearing of the shirts or the kneeling and things related to like Black Lives Matter, as you saw them taking more of a stance and coming forward, you know, in support of women and equity and things like that. And so I'm curious, you know, in your space, like what are you seeing and what are you even doing with TBT in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a time of like unprecedented change, right? And we have multiple social justice movements going on at the same time, right? There's racial equity, gender equity, and you know, among others. And it's sort of like you don't want one to take a backseat to the other. They're all important. They're all literally changing so fast right now. You know, TBT, we're like still, some people say like they think they walk into our office and there'll be 100 people there putting on what we do, but we're still such a small organization, and we're often and always thinking about diversity of our team. You know, related to what Yvonne said, you know, we really believe strongly that different perspectives you know, come from your sort of lived experience. And that is always, you know, helpful for our product, what we're trying to do, our team, our learning, our growth. So we're always looking at that. And then, you know, we have a very diverse player pool. I mean, the larger TBT family is very diverse. So we're trying to sort of keep up with all these you know, these movements that are going on at the same time, and you know, address them from whatever perspective we can, you know, because, you know, we own this sort of little space in the basketball community, and however we can address those. You know, I do find that this is an area that frankly makes people nervous. You know, and maybe I can say that because I'm an Asian woman, but you know, you know, I find that people feel like they need to tiptoe around this a little bit, or you bring it up and they're sort of like, you know, like, I don't know how to speak about this. I don't want to offend the person I'm speaking to. I was also just thinking, like, you know, with my name, like often people don't expect that they're going to find like an Asian woman on the other side of the Zoom call. So, you know, it's like up and down. You know, I think what Connie was saying about authenticity, it's like you also do want to find people who to work for us or be involved in TBT who are authentically passionate about it, and you know, sort of like bring an authentic perspective to their work, or to even being a part of the tournament. So it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, frankly, you know, like it's a heavy lift to try to like keep up with everything that's going on in the world right now, which is like a huge generalization. But, you know, it's like all these movements happening at once, and you're trying to sort of keep up with all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have two things to say on this, and then we'll jump to something else. But I think like a lot of times, I think it's okay to say that you're not going to be perfect when you're trying, whether you're an individual or you're a company. At the same time, like intentionally taking the steps, intentionally focusing there, I think can make all the difference. And I also appreciate, Jen, what you said about people. A lot of times people don't want to have these conversations. They don't want to talk about it. They're nervous. If somebody get offended or what. And like, that's part of why I talk about it and try to bring it to the forefront a lot. I think like the more we have these conversations, I don't like easy. I don't think it'll ever get easy per se, but I think it just, you know, you kind of become more comfortable navigating the conversation. Sometimes I think just inviting people in is good and part of it. But that actually brings me to another thing, which is voice, finding your voice, right? So, you know, being able to have this kind of conversation does take the ability to exercise your voice, stand in your strength, speak confidently. And you are all five amazing women here who have somehow been able to find your voice, build your confidence in it. And that probably didn't happen overnight, or maybe all of you are far ahead of me a lot early in your career had that. You know, it was something I definitely had to develop over time and still work on it. And I'm curious, like, anybody want to share your story of finding your voice, having confidence in it, But if you ever get imposter syndrome, younger people often get surprised when I say that, like, oh yeah, I get that too. They're like, wait, what?
I know,
So-
Shauna, you're like the last person who should feel that.
Thanks, Shauna.
I mean, I'll start with that one. That lawsuit that I alluded to earlier was like the first, I was quite young. In fact, I had to have my parents sign on with me because I was 17 at the time that we filed the lawsuit. And it was like the first time I recognized that like you could have a voice, frankly. I mean, I just wasn't, I mean, I don't know now, like our kids grow up with all these mediums to sort of express themselves that, you know, we didn't have. Now I've totally aged myself, but whatever. And so that was like the first thing, but I would say over time, it's like being around people like you guys, you know, and having like a network and a close group of friends that are kind of constantly lifting you up and making you feel like what you have to say is valid, and you know, that you're special, you know, and that you know, you're all the things, you know, and I think that's really helped me. I have one friend who's particularly outspoken in this area, and she always says, you know, I sort of just realized at one point that like everybody just like everybody has some imposter syndrome, and you know, and like nobody's really smarter than you on the other side, you know, like they just are more confident and they'll just say what they have to say and they don't second guess themselves. And I always have that in the back of my head because I wasn't a very confident kid, or I wasn't very, I don't know, I was kind of an introvert, not very outgoing. And I was always the youngest. So I think I felt like really, I just didn't have that like innate confidence that a lot of other kids or, you know, adults around me had. But, you know, I always think of that. I'm like, you know, everybody has a unique perspective and something to say. And if you kind of just hold on to that, then like the imposter syndrome goes away.
Yeah.
I like that.
For me, it was to, you know, for building confidence, you're right in terms of having a peer group that you can talk openly with, that you can share concerns, hear how they might have dealt with a similar challenge that you're going through. Something like that always helps. And then, you know, professionally within an, you know, an office organization, finding like a champion for you. Like, I am not one to come in and dominate a conversation with 10 other people on the call. I like to take in all the information. And sometimes what happens, what I found myself doing was almost like waiting my turn to speak instead of like interjecting. And knowing that about myself, I've been able to tell select people that, and they will help open up the opportunity for me. So if you find those people that like you're comfortable saying, you know, this is an area I know I need to work on, and they will then help, you know, direct the conversation. What do you want to add here? So you don't feel like you have to wait for the right time to come in. And especially if you don't feel like if you feel like you're interrupting, if you feel like it's not the right time and place, that has helped me be able to find my voice. And then I think about that for more junior people that I manage, and you know, either having the conversation with them beforehand or in a group situation, making sure I give them a chance to add to the conversation too, just so they start to grow there and who they are and build their own confidence and like have their own voice, and that they feel that, you know, they're a part of the conversation as much as anyone else. So
that's really valuable, Kim, coming from someone who's like always always happy to interject. And that's a reminder I always give myself. But yeah, I wanted to agree with what Jen said, because I feel like I definitely I was always like the bossy kid. I've always been like a confident person, but I was also kind of raised to be like respectful of like the adults. And sometimes I do still find myself thinking of myself as like sort of the younger person or the less experienced person. And what I found so meaningful in these networking circles that we've built is the recognition, to Jen's point, that like everybody feels the same way inside. It's like the advice I'd go back and give my younger self is like, just trust your gut and like, don't be afraid, because it's like, you're all like saying exactly what's in my heart. Like we all have these same feelings often, but it's just like overcoming your own fear and the assumptions you're making about the other people. Like I was reading a book that said like, we tend to like immediately make an assumption about everyone that we meet that they don't like us or they don't want to listen to us. And it's like, what, that's built on nothing. It's just your own, voice that you need to overcome. Like, why not go into the experience saying like, everybody likes me, really wants to get to know me and is interested in what I have to say. So that's like the number one thing I have to work with myself to overcome is like just trusting my gut and just feeling comfortable, like not being afraid that like no one else thinks the same way as me or no one else. It's like, I love that person that's like, no question is a stupid, ask the question because somebody else probably has it. But I think it's refreshing and comforting, like no matter what level of people I'm speaking with, that like inevitably there's that connectivity of like, oh, we deep down, we feel the same way. I'm not the only one. So it's like, you just have to tell yourself that, which is so hard to do.
I think that's an interesting point, Julie, because I remember I've always been the youngest kind of leader, always in a group. I graduated early. I always felt like people were like, oh, that's great, little one, you know what I mean? And so you do put that kind of like Kim's point of just waiting your turn about it. And I was like, wait a minute, what? No, I got this faster than everybody else in this room. So then I should say something, but what I've actually kind of developed over the past few years was somebody said that your style is not the same as your colleagues, even your male colleagues. You sit there, and mine has always been relational in how I've found my voice. I was kind of a shy kid unless I was performing, so I always put myself in that space of like, when I have to do this, I'm performing, as opposed to owning. Just like, no, I have the knowledge base and the skills and the expertise, like I deserve to be here. But my way of doing it, my way of leading, my voice is connecting with people, no matter where they are at on a level, no matter where they come from. And I had an executive coach who said, like, you just need to be more of yourself as opposed to trying to be a leader. Like, it sounds kind of a weird thing because being yourself is naturally already going to make yourself a leader. You're already a leader. People are influenced by you and come to you. And that's because you're just being authentic. And I think for me, that was like a hard brain shift, because I thought, to Connie's point earlier, like that woman you were referring to earlier, like you thought you had to be a certain way to earn respect, as opposed to being yourself and earning respect that way. And that natural ability just comes to the surface. And so that has been something where I've had to be a lot more mindful of my voices being in the true sense of who I am, that may be serving others, that may be helping others, but just being there. I mentor a lot of, at USC, I mentor a lot of grads or new alumni or grad students, or first generation kids that are going into college. And I realize that makes me a better leader, because I'm hearing, how can I connect with them, and how can I give them a voice to say, like, you belong here, you matter. I feel like an imposter so many times, I'm teaching or I'm giving these things, but that's just my own voice in my head playing games. And so I think for me, that finding the voice is truly finding who you are as a leader, and the authenticity of who you are as a leader coming to the surface, and not comparing yourself to somebody else that leads a different way, and that just may be their center. But I really do find this networking, just like everybody was saying, like this, having this strong network of confidants and people that you can be real with, allows you to continue to find, at least for me, helps me find my voice. And also as a gut check. I appreciate when people say, hey, not being real, you're not being true to yourself, like you've got a little off track. And I think for me, that's how I've continued to grow, because I'm not there yet. I have my days, but I feel like I have to just remind myself of who I am, and that matters.
Yvonne, I'm so glad you said that. As you could probably see, I'm like grinning as you're talking. It's probably a really great way. I know we're cutting it close on time, and you all are busy ladies. So I'm going to wrap this up and let you all get back to making some big impact in your days. But Yeah, I'm grinning here because it's such a perfect way to wrap this up about being an authentic leader and about having real talk. And that's totally why I created this platform. I mean, it's built into the brand itself. And so I just can't thank you enough, each one of you collectively, all that you're doing to make an impact, to help yourselves and others evolve. And for being so open and sharing today, and hope that the audience really takes all of this to heart. And these are all amazing ladies to get to know, to follow. So check them out. We will post links to everybody's pages. Thank you all so much. And I hope that you have wonderful days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Shauna.
Bye all.